All right, today we are working on a Regal with a Volvo Penta IO. It's a 200 V6, and the issue is overheating. I've actually worked on a previous boat for this customer that was almost the exact same boat with the exact same motor and the exact same issue. And I believe we had the exact same problems. So same symptoms, overheating, and I think the same problem. First thing I did was I brought up the motor. You can see, if you look at that motor, it's really coated with pond scum and aquatic plants and stuff like that. So last time the problem was that she had gotten beached and really kind of revved the motor and sucked a lot of sand into the system. This time there was no event that triggered the problem. It just, she was using it and it just started overheating. Seemed to be almost intermittent. She'd use it a while and it'd be okay. Then it would start overheating again, and then she'd use it. It'd go into limp mode. She'd bring it home and take it back out again. It would be okay for a while, blah, blah, blah. So first thing I did was I raised up the outdrive and I took the screens from the water intake down on the foot. Took those off, which was a trick, because as you could, I didn't get in the water. I had to lean up over and pull those screens off. It's not a screen per se. It's a cover that has small holes in it, so it acts as a screen, but it's not like a mesh screen that you would think of. I'm sure all of you have seen it. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything sucked up in there. I did a reverse. You can see the hose connected. I did a reverse flush, hoping I could, maybe kick anything out of there. That's the first thing I thought of, because you can see this is what she comes in and out of. And most of these aquatic plants probably aren't that bad, but that stuff is killer. Sorry, customer came out and I don't think she wants to be on camera. So I did a reverse flush. As long as I have the hose on it, I can run it as long as I want. There's no overheating. But the moment I take the hose off and lower the drive down, just use the raw water and water pump, it immediately overheats. As most compact bow riders that have an IO in it, you have to take the entire seat off. The first clue that there's a problem was the cap of the water pump. And that's a telltale. If you get to this point, or you can even see down into the bilge, into the engine bay, and you see burning like that, you know your water pump is bad. You know your impeller at the very minimum is bad. So that's the cap that goes on the end of the water pump. Right there. So that's a telltale. And sure enough, we pulled the water pump off, and there you have it. It's just toast. Now it's a fairly low hour motor, and the new owner hasn't put that many additional hours on, so most likely it was already in really bad shape when she bought it. So that's for sure needs to be repaired. Whether that's the entire problem or not, we don't know. Now anytime you see missing fins like this, you have to be concerned, because that rubber went somewhere, right? So with the water pump, this is your intake, and this goes out. It goes out and right there, and then up into your heat exchanger. So last time I had to pull the heat exchanger, and it was just filled with sand, a lot of the missing fins, and just all kinds of debris. So we don't know for sure whether or not the heat exchanger needs to be cleaned out, but honestly, it's such a pain to get to this point, you may as well pull that heat exchanger. It's only 4 bolts, one there, and then there are 2. Let's see if I can get you way back here. All not sure if you can see that or not, but there are 2 bolts back there. So not a big deal. You pull those off. You do have to pull the hose off, which is kind of a pain, but not the end of the world. I don't even see a hose clamp on that. Is there one? Yeah, there's a hose clamp on it. So, if you're missing fins and you go to replace the impeller and rebuild the water pump, you may as well go ahead and pull your heat exchanger. I did all this before and I took some pictures of it, but I figured if I'm doing it again this time I'll actually take some video. All I have is my phone on me. I didn't bring my GoPro, so I can't really strap it to my head or do first person or clamp it on something. So you probably won't see me pull all of this, but once I pull it, I will show you what I find. By the way, the part number for this is 217-00445, and with this one, you know, Volvo Penta parts are a lot more difficult to source than Merc Cruiser or any outboard. Those I can go to Crowley Marine or boats.net and look up a diagram and find the part number very quickly. You just don't have anything like that when it comes to Volvo. If you know of one, please let me know in the comments. But this side is where the part number would be. So if it's not in really bad shape, you can simply pull the cap off and read the part number. Let me show you what I mean. So there's the replacement, and as you can see, if you can see, the part number is right on there. Volvo Penta 217-00443. But again, if you see that when you get down this far and to getting ready to pull off your water pump, most likely when you open it up, you're going to find this, and you're not going to be able to know what the part number is. So this is the outside, and they do that. You can tell because, again, they make this end removable so you can inspect the impeller somewhat without actually having to pull the entire water pump off. Now, having said that, you can't really see a lot. This thing gets buried way down in there. You can kind of see like these missing fins and stuff straight on, but you're not really going to see stuff like this. Like these fins look bad, but you can't really see that these chunks in the middle, that these spaces in the middle are just completely missing, which is really where most of your water movement takes place, not on the end. It's that full fin, your water kind of comes in, as you can see down there, in the center. And so that's really where you're moving most of your water, not on the edge. That's why sometimes these center pieces go first. So I always pull the entire water pump off because I also want to pull these hoses off and inspect them. So I reach down in here and do what I can to see if I can feel any pieces. Sometimes I'll pull them all the way off. I'll probably give this another reverse flush right through there after I have this heat exchanger off. If you get yours off and then you forget which way it was supposed to go in and you're questioning that, it's not too difficult to figure out, because this is your intake and that is your output. So clearly it's obvious that it's going to be spinning this way. It's got to move water around. And again, your part number would always be facing out, in case you're questioning that. So these are not the easiest to get in and out, honestly. Nowhere near as easy as replacing like an outboards, but it's doable. There are a couple of videos on YouTube that claim you have to have a special tool. They do make a special tool for it, or you have to make a special tool. There have been a couple of people that have done that, but I've successfully replaced these without having any problem doing it manually. And I don't have anyone to hold the camera for me or a stand, so I can't really show you that, but it's as simple as putting this down, getting it started. Once you get it kind of on the splines, then you can use this here in the back to spin it while you're holding on to it and pressing, and it'll go right in. It does help to use some lube. You can either use some marine grease. I like to use this T9. It's just excellent lubrication and really helps quite a bit without as much of a mess. By the way, the impeller kit does come with an O-ring, which goes right here. And it also comes with new hardware, and that new hardware is for this. Somebody's been in here at one point because all of them should have these little rubber O-rings, and 2 of them were missing. So somebody's actually been in here, and just like that, it's in. So whether or not you need a special tool to remove it, I don't. I mean, it's trash anyways. I just get in there and pry it out with a screwdriver or whatever's handy. It's very easy to push it in. Again, I kind of wish I had a way to show you that, but all I did was I have my, once I get it started, and it's very easy to get started, I just hold right here and push pressure with my palm and then turn this, and it just goes right in. It doesn't go in instantly, but it doesn't take that much effort. It's not that difficult. A lot of people don't like to work on Volvos. This is a magnificent engine. It's got an aluminum core, it's got a heat exchanger, it's got a closed loop cooling system. It's really a dynamite motor. Now, having parts being so difficult to source is one deterrent for people not wanting to work on them. And the other is, and this may be the case with others as well, it's really a hodgepodge of parts, some of which were sourced locally, some of which were sourced overseas, and so it's a mixture of metric and SAE. A good example is right here. That is a 12 millimeter, but there are a number of bolts and things like that in here that, well, and a good example is the bolts for this arm, which go right there. And by the way, there are 2 of them. Those are SAE, and then this is metric, so kind of strange. So now that we have the new impeller in, we're just going to set that aside, and we're going to go ahead and pull the heat exchanger, because I don't want to put the water pump back on, especially not reattach these hoses until I have a chance to pull the heat exchanger, look inside there. Depending on how much or what, if anything, that I find, that'll give me an idea of how important it is to do a back flush. And if I find anything at all, which I suspect that I will, what we're going to do is we're going to back flush right here. We're going to jet some water through there. So now we'll go ahead and pull off the heat exchanger. These first 2 bolts are pretty easy because they're accessible. And I wouldn't pull them all the way off until you have them all loosened. This one's going to be a little more difficult. I might have to do it by hand, or let's see if an angle adapter will work. Okay, that's quite a bit of an angle. I'm not sure how well this is going to work because these are torqued in there pretty good, but let's give it a try. So this is just a cheap Harbor Freight impact wrench, and it has seen better days. It's been through some, it's meant for light duty, and I've put it through some heavy duty, so we may just need to do this by hand. Yep. Okay, so this O-ring, or this retaining ring, this to basically seal this hose here, is a flathead, but in my case it was completely out of sight. You can't see it very well, and you know what a pain it is to loosen something that's torqued on pretty good with a flathead. So what I did instead was I just used a socket, and that's 8 millimeter. When you loosen that, as you start to loosen it, if you start to hear like water movement that's unexpected, that's totally normal. When you loosen that up, you're gonna see some water kind of flow through here. So don't be alarmed. Okay, Now for the back bolts. They're not too inaccessible. They're pretty easy to get to. There's one right there and then one right there. And you could just get that with like a socket and extension. And just a note on the top bolt, of all the 4 bolts, that's probably the one that is the least accessible. You may have to kind of move the oil dipstick. Well, the dipstick is right there, but the oil drain tube goes very, very close to that bolt and may be in your way. You don't really have to disassemble anything, but you may have to kind of squeeze it in there in order to get that socket to land properly and seat properly on that bolt. So these bolts don't come out easy. This is the first time this heat exchanger has been pulled off, and as you can see, there's blue Loctite on it. So you're not gonna finger loosen these. Like a lot of bolts, once you break the the tension, you'll be able to pull it out the rest of the way with your finger, or maybe just with your finger turning the the socket or the extension. That's not the case here. And then also, and this is just my personal preference, when taking things out that are mounted like this, I always like to take the bottom bolt out first. That way it's kind of hanging from the top bolts. If you take the top bolt out first, the whole thing can kind of go lopsided and put stress and tension on this bottom bolt and make it more difficult to get out. Then you've got to kind of hold this back in place. So it's just easier this way, because the natural leverage is when you take this out, it's just going to rest against there, as opposed to this kind of falling over, if that makes sense. So I'm in Florida, and I always try to get, schedule my jobs fairly early, because it just gets so oppressively hot here after like 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock that it's crazy. And we always get afternoon thunderstorms. Unfortunately, she wasn't available and didn't really want me working on the boat without her here. So I didn't show up until noon, and I may not make it today. It looks like we may very possibly get rained out. Now I'm undercover here, but in Florida, it rains sideways a lot of times. It's wind-driven rain, so we'll see how it goes. So 3 bolts are out. If I were to pick an order, for me personally, I take this one out first. I take the lower in the back out second. I take the upper in the back out third, and then it's all kind of hanging from this one. So it makes it a little bit easier to pull out, in my opinion. Okay, so in this case, I guess it may not really matter that much, because it fits so snugly on there. I don't remember the last one kind of holding itself in place with all the bolts off, but all 4 bolts are off and it's still right there. So I'm gonna have to kind of pry it off. Hopefully it won't be an issue. Okay, it came off pretty easily. Unfortunately, you're gonna drain all of your coolant. This actually uses coolant, and there really isn't any way that I know of to be able to there's no like valve or anything I can turn so to prevent that from happening. If anybody knows a way to prevent that, let me know. Yeah, hear that? See how the wind's picking up? It's gonna rain like sideways. I just hope if it's raining sideways, it's raining this way, because we do have pretty good coverage there. If it rains sideways from here or there, we're screwed. Anyways, got it off. Probably of everything, the most difficult thing is this rear hose here. It's just kind of difficult to get to, but it's not too terrible as things go. If you're used to working on IOs, you know that everything is inaccessible. But there she sits, right there, and hopefully I'll be able to take her apart out here instead of in here, but I may have to bring it over here and just set it on that towel. Okay, so these are 8mm. So we're racing against time here. It over here, get these 2. Sorry, things keep going out of frame. I'm not a very good videographer. I'm a much better boat mechanic. Okay, got it off. All right, these are pretty easy to get off. They actually give you some nice little pry points here, which makes it pretty easy. So a skinny screwdriver just pops that right off, and just pops that right off. And as you can see, we definitely have some debris in there. So I've seen worse. The last time I did this for her, it was way worse, but that's certainly going to impede the water flow. Same thing here. So let's snap a couple of pictures so I can show her. And really, there's not much to it other than that. All we do is just jet some water through there, remove that debris, put it back together, and reinstall. So I could already see, in addition to the debris that we have, look, there are the pieces of the fins right there. So that's where they made it to. It's actually kind of encouraging, because if they got caught up here and didn't make it through to the other side, then they didn't make it, hopefully, into the water jacket of the motor, because that would mean an engine pull. And that's what they had to do last time. Even though I cleaned it out, so much debris had gotten through. More sand than, just rubber and stuff, but so much sand had gotten through there that it went right into the water jacket of the motor and caused some pretty major problems. So the one upside to this storm coming is it just dropped the temperature probably by a good 10-15 degrees. It was 95 when I got here. We're probably down, well, at least at 85 at this point, if not 80. Okay, got her all cleaned out. At least I got this done before the rain started. So in addition to a lot of the rubber, the fins from the water pump, and all of this debris, there were some actual rocks lodged in there. So somebody has run this aground a few times, whether it be on purpose at a sandbar or by accident, maybe going through something shallow with a rocky bottom. But anyways, those are nicely cleaned out. You want to jet through both sides. There's another little rock right there. Let's see. So what I'll do is I'll jet it from the opposite side to push that out before I put it back together. Make sure you don't forget the O-rings. They won't usually fall off, but just make sure. And also make sure you have your fins here correct. What I like to do is just when you pull it off, just let it sit right there on each side, and that way you won't have any problems. All right, there's the rain. It's not so hard yet. This is nothing. Hopefully it'll stay like this, because it just cools things off nicely and won't start raining sideways with a bunch of wind. I went ahead and after washing it off, I brought it inside here, and I'm just going to reassemble it now. So one of the reasons that I videotape is to make sure that I'm putting everything back together correctly, because it's easy to get confused. Now some components, some parts have a bolt pattern so that something like this lid will only go on one way. This is not the case with this heat exchanger, so you need to make sure that your fins are on the right way. You can easily put it on this way and it'll bolt on without any problems, but it will cause you problems in the future. Okay, and then we will torque these to spec. There's the torque right there. And yeah, this is more like it. You can see it's raining kind of sideways, but we're pretty well covered. If that weren't going this way, they were coming this way, it'd be coming right in this, because we're right next to it. So when putting the heat exchanger back on, just be patient. It's not that difficult to get on. Understand that it's going to take a little bit of pressure. You don't want to force it, but as you saw, there were two seals there that the O-ring is going to give you a little bit of resistance on each one of those seals. But once you get the bolts lined up, I suggest lining this one up first. You're going to have to push it in and pull it up a little bit to get that one threaded. and then this one you just push the bottom in to get it threaded, and then the back two should be pretty well lined up at this point. All right, it's finally bolted back on. Really, 3 of the bolts are pretty easy. Obviously, these are easy, and this bottom bolt is pretty easy. By far, that top bolt is the most difficult for a variety of reasons. One, because you have that tube in the way, so that's part of it. The other is, even though you get all the other bolts lined up, and you think, okay, since these are lined up, then the fourth one obviously has to be lined up. It's not. This is where having a camera comes in handy, so that you can put the camera down there and see which way you need to move it. Otherwise, you're just completely blind. If it's not threading, you don't know whether it's, sitting too high, sitting too low. It needs to move backward, forward, diagonally. In this case, it was diagonal, which really sucked. It had to go up and to the left. So be patient. You do not want to strip that bolt. You don't want to strip the end of that bolt trying to go in. You sure as hell don't want to strip the threads into the block. So just be patient. What I ended up having to do is loosen this bolt up a little bit. After I knew it had to go up into the left, I moved it up into the left and then tightened that bolt, and did that a few times until I put the camera down there and it looked like it was aligned. Just if you start to screw it in and it kind of comes to a stop, that could mean that it's threaded, but it could also mean that it's just bound, that you just have a binding, and you don't want to automatically put a bunch of torque on that and force it in, because that's when you're going to strip the bolt, and that's when nightmares start. Well, that sucks. So the hoses go back on pretty easily, at least these did. Apparently I loosened up this hose clamp a little bit too much. Don't even try to get these reconnected while it's down on the hose. You're just gonna frustrate yourself. Just pull the hose off. Do this while it's off the hose manually, and then slide it back down over the hose. Save yourself some grief. Even getting that damn thing reconnected when it's off the hose is no picnic. So trust me, you do not want to try to do that while it's on the hose. So when I took these off, the screws were way back there hidden, so I had to take them off blind. Not that big of a deal, but when you put them back on, try to make them as visible as possible. Trust me, just being able to see what you're doing makes it so much easier. I tried to do the same thing with this one too. That was actually way back in the back, but at least this way, it's just I've got better access to it. And then also use one of these. Don't use one of these. Then do your final tightening with one of these. You do not want to try to hand tighten it. This is not going to get it tight enough. So make sure you crank that down pretty good. And take a look at it when you're done. Make sure there's that little bit of a bulge there, not too much, but that really lets you know that you've tightened it pretty well. This is under pretty high pressure, so make sure that you do that right. All right, onto the water pump. I'm not gonna bother trying to clean this up or anything. And this is how this should look. So I'm using the new hardware. You need a lock nut on the outside, and then these O-rings on the inside. Those O-rings fit down inside there. Very important to keep it from leaking. Okay, and whatever you do, don't forget your O-ring. It may, like this one, be like a little bit bigger than you want it to be. What you can do is either put it in the fridge so that it contracts a little bit, or you can use a little bit of grease. This one's not too bad. If it were as hot as it usually is here in Florida, then there's a possibility that could be all over the place. I mean, like way out here. When it expands from heat, and then if you're not careful, it'll bind. You won't get good seating there, and you won't get a good seal. And boat mechanics like a walrus. They like a nice tight seal. Okay, there's no specific torque rating required for these. Just make sure you're using good practice and just kind of snug it first. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. Snug it first all the way around. And once it's snugged, then go back and forth. And I'll just do it one more time. All right, that should be good to go. We're ready to go back on. So in order to get this back on, there are only 3 bolts, but you need to twist this to line it up with the bolt pattern back there. Let's see if I can get you down there. See the bolt pattern? So you've got to line these bolts up with that. In fact, if you look at it from this side, you'll see that this won't even go in unless those bolts are lined up because of these little grooves. Those little grooves have to line up with that and that and that. So it's not too bad, but you have to get it on just right. That's what she said. Okay, she's in there. What also makes it tricky is those 2 bolts in the back that with this little retaining post also have to be lined up. So you have to get those lined up and then that bolt pattern lined up as well. The nice thing about it though is once it's in, you're not going to be searching for the threads like I did with this goddamn heat exchanger, because that lines up with it, those little grooves lines it up. There's really no making a mistake as to whether or not the holes in the bolts are going to hit the threads. So really now all there is to do is to get those bolts in there just to make sure that it is in the right spot, and then I need to hook up those 2 hoses and give her a shot. All right, we're reassembled. So far so good. We've had it running for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and we're well under the 175, which is good. The other good sign is that the heat exchanger is cool to the touch. Before, after 5 minutes, we would go over 75 if the drive was in the water. And the heat exchanger got so hot to the touch that it took, well, several hours. I had to wait overnight, basically, to come back, which we had to come back for the part anyways. But I had to wait a long time to be able to even work on it. Oh no. Oh. But it's not even over 75. Or 175. I don't understand, because it never went over 175, and there's no way it should. Before it didn't, the alarm didn't go off until it was at 180. All right, trying to troubleshoot this alarm. It's not the same alarm that I was getting yesterday when it got too hot, and the overheating alarm should not go off at 175. That's exactly where it needs to be, and I could still touch the heat exchanger with the palm of my hand. It's not quite cool to the touch, but it's barely warm to the touch. I don't think this is an overheating alarm. That was a slow beep, probably 3 seconds in between. This was a faster beep, like maybe 1 to 2 seconds in between. The owner's saying that it might have something to do with the depth finder, because that's the same alarm that she's heard before on that. But I don't know anything about this depth finder, so I'm just kind of playing with it a little bit. It's running again and it's not happening, so maybe that was it. All right, well, it turned out the alarm was the depth finder. It's not overheating, everything's good to go. Little tip on removing and putting this panel back on, and I learned this the hard way. So I was reaching way down, scraping up all my arms, you know, going up against the hot motor and everything to get to these. This is flexible, so start on one side, and you can literally do it like this. This will flex out and you can put it back in. Same thing with taking it out. You know, once you get some of these out, this will flex out, so then you can get to that, and then you can flex it out to get to that way. And then don't forget to put your brace on like I just did, because now I get to take this back off again, put this on, and put it all back together all over again. Luckily, I've done it enough times that I can do it pretty quickly. So hopefully you won't make the same boneheaded mistake that I did and forget the bar. But if you do, you don't have to completely take this all the way apart. Those are the ones that are hardest to get to. You can literally just take this one, and those two. And like I said, this is flexible, and so you can get to where that brace goes in. So, all back together. Job done.